Item that we have are the minutes.
Move they be approved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Vicki. Do we have Brenda on the line yet?
Not yet.
Okay, okay. Reports to the board. First of all, we have Michael for the SGA, please. Then Michael can go home because he needs to study.
I'm good. Zeros, you add them up and all you need is a 1 in front of them. I'm kidding. No.
What?
I said zeros throughout the semester and all you need is just 1 in the front. So then you're good.
The faculty in the room got that.
Anyhow, student government's actually been busy with plans for the student lounge and comprising a list to get to Lisa. I saw her walk in for speaker of graduation, and that's been where we're at the last like 3 weeks. So we got a lot of things coming together. I think for the lounge, kind of opened our eyes on some issues and some non-issues, and we're hoping to settle that really quick. I think so. Whenever you do have a chance to let us know what we need to do next, I mean, we're available for that. So tomorrow afternoon is going to be Ask a Senator Day, and apparently I got volunteered to get cream pie in my face, so that'll be interesting. Along with I think one other senator too as well. So.
Was that in your mouth? Or?
No, I guess they're just gonna slap it in my face. I don't know. Yeah, ask a question or something. I think, and if you feel the urge to get at me, I guess you can get at me. I don't know. But then let's see. And I'm on that committee for the Teacher Excellence Award, and Megan and I and our group.
That's Brenda.
And our group, I think, has come quite a long ways. I believe the proposed that we have some policy written up, and we're going to propose that to LLT. I believe that meet Thursday and Friday this week also. So get feedback from them, and then there should be something that's going to be moving forward through both faculty senate and student government senate, and be set in stone for us. So that's about it. Unless y'all have any questions for me.
Thank you, Michael.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Next, we have Student Senate, or Staff Senate, Kevin Yarborough. There he goes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, President Schaefer. Well, first of all, I need to start out tonight by making an apology. Staff Senate has never formally welcomed Judy Hay to Student Services, so welcome aboard, and realize you have the biggest constituent group of Staff Senate people anyway. So and so I'm not standing up here 6 months now apologizing again. We'd like to welcome Jose also. Couple of quick things.
Hey, Joe,
Yes, ma'am.
did you just introduce Jose to everybody?
I did not. Kevin Yarbrough did. He beat me to the punch, as I'm sure Faculty Senate will and everybody else.
Okay.
But I will do my best to do that when it comes my turn as well, Trustee Little.
Okay, all right, because I wanted to make sure I said hi to him.
Okay.
You did.
Carry on.
You ready, Brenda? You ready, Brenda? Couple of quick things. We do have our annual ice cream social that's open for all the employees, to include the board members and faculty and staff. It's the last Thursday that we're actually on campus during spring break, so it's a little quieter. The students gone, no offense to the student government. But just a little retreat, per se, with ice cream and stuff down in the CCI building. And one thing we are doing this year is we're going to feed off of our chili cook-off with our fundraiser for our scholarship. So we're going to do that with a cutest baby and cutest pet photo. So all employees or those that want to participate, they submit those to us. And you just, while you're eating your ice cream, you can go around and just drop some extra change from under your seat of your car or whatever and just donate it into the cups and stuff. And we made about $75 for that scholarship doing the chili thing. So hope to do about the same. But that's March 21st in the afternoon at 1:30. And then the next thing is our annual staff retreat that comes up in May. We've talked to Dr. Schaefer here a couple of times here recently, and the problem with the staff retreat, and I've mentioned it to this board probably about the same time last year, was we put a lot of time, money on a location off campus, a lot of money to feed lunch to the staff, and then there's money spent on presenters and such. But we still can only seem to get about a third participation from the staff to this. It's never been a mandatory thing, and we're not looking to create a mandatory thing either. But in today's day, when we're looking at money spent and money well spent, sometimes you have to question if that was really worthwhile. Then you also sit there and you understand that VPs and deans have their staff going to more specific professional development things for their actual duties and responsibilities that they have. And obviously the staff retreat was just designed to get away, relax a little bit, get some teamwork training, maybe some customer service, and just things like, trainings like that. So we've talked to Dr. Schaefer a couple of times here recently, and he's in agreement that we want to try something new. And that new would mean that there would be no staff retreat in May. What we're going to try to do is on the fall in-service in August, obviously the entire employee base is there for the in-service in the morning. We all break for lunch, and then faculty has some stuff that they have going on in the afternoon. And we're going to attempt to try this with the staff that same afternoon. What that allows us to do is, one, save a lot of money because we're not off campus, we're not feeding the staff lunch. Hopefully increase participation, understanding that's a day or two before the fall semester starts. That's going to tie up some staff, and we understand that, especially in student services. But then try to streamline all of this towards strategic goals and stuff that are presented at the in-service that Dr. Schaefer would present that morning. So if we can just kind of get it all in line together, save some money, and hopefully get some participation. So that will be our new plan of attack. So no staff retreat in May, but we're going to move it to the in-service with those ideas in mind. A lot of things to still work out and stuff, but a new idea. We're going to try it out and see how it works. So, but that's all I have to present, unless there's any questions for anything.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Faculty Senate, Jeff Schmidl.
All right, thank you, Chairwoman Merrill and Board of Trustees. As you all anticipated, I would like to welcome Dr. Jose Fierro. I think faculty is excited about the opportunity to work with Dr. Fierro and move the college forward in our academic parts. So I'm glad he's here. And I see that you have 3 sets of minutes, so I'm sorry about that, but I don't really have anything specific I want to point out. I would just entertain questions at this point.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I didn't check all of the minutes, but I see in the last ones there was a good deal of concern among the faculty over some suggestion about programs disappearing, a minimum of 12 students required to run a class and things like this. Did you feel that the answers you got from Dr. Pat and the president helped clarify that and allay some of the faculty's fears, or not?
I think that it helped with some of the fears. I wouldn't say total, but what we invited Dr. Joe and Pat to a faculty forum, which was pretty well attended. There were a lot of faculty members there. In fact, the room was, crowded. There wasn't any place to sit. And they did a good job of answering the questions. I think there's still some concern. There's some programs. So I understand where Dr. Schaefer's coming from with these policies. And I think mostly faculty do. That, we want to focus on student success and how can we help students be more successful. One of the ways is to really take a close look at our programs. I mean, they really do need to be looked at. And so we appreciate that. There's some concern about credit hours and things like that. The recommendation the Senate made was that we do this in sequence, that there were some institutional competencies introduced about the same time. And so we said, let's get the institutional competencies figured out, then the gen ed requirements, and then the program requirements. And so we're working on that right now.
Any other questions? Ed?
Is there any discussion as you look at changing, I guess you broadly are assessing policies regarding credit hours and number of sections and all kinds of issues, but programs and competencies and institutional issues or outcomes that you're looking at. Is there an interest perhaps at this time of also having a group begin to look at, or I shouldn't say begin because I think it's out there, but to maybe talk about program review, because that's part of what's going on there. And so I don't know whether either one of you could clarify that a little bit for me or not.
Well, I was on the committee looking at program reviews, and Dr. Patwell, who's here, made a lot of progress in this area. And I would suspect that there's going to be something finalized this semester about program reviews. We made a lot of progress on that committee before he even left. So, but yeah, we were looking at how can you review a program and make it more meaningful, something that the board can look at and see, do we need to put some resources here, have it drive our budget and our planning a little bit better, and not just what faculty view as busy work.
Madam Chair, and to follow up on that, we had and received the key performance indicators. Previously, we've been provided those, and I wonder if there's discussion of how those will feed into that program review.
Do you want to take a stab at that one?
I'll let Dr. Schaefer handle that.
Madam Chair, Trustee Mosier. Yes, in fact, so the work that Dr. Schwartfiger and the committee looking at program review was really tackling was taking a look and trying to transform the current process into more of a self-study process of our programs, and looking at a variety of models that have been successful at other institutions. That really gets at the more qualitative, and I'd even suggest more subjective analysis from the faculty perspective, and from what we hope to be a group of faculty that will comprise a program review committee. At the same time, we want to augment the program review with more of the quantitative analysis based on our key performance indicators. One of the things that we've been struggling with, though, is finding the time within our institutional research office to do that. We actually had a conversation either yesterday or the day before with folks from the College Brain Trust to see if they could help us kickstart that and go through an initial program analysis based off of the key indicators, and then help us set up a structure to provide those data and essentially give each of our programs a program snapshot, if you will, that will accompany the self-study components of the program review, and then can be used for consideration of plans for, as Jeff pointed out, invested resources, improvements in the programs, things to look at. And so there'll be sort of two components to that process that will feed together.
Madam Chair?
Trustee Mosier.
One item, and maybe it's been considered within the context of these, but we hear a lot about state's interest when we're looking at the strategic plan, and we're trying to set our interest relative to that. Will this program review take into consideration or somehow tie into that so that we can accomplish that goal?
Madam Chair, Trustee Mosier. The quick and easy answer is yes, I believe so. As you know, we've had conversations with the Wyoming Community College Commission, and have been part of or trying to work with the update of their strategic plan. The more complex answer is currently there is question about who defines the state's interest and exactly what those are, and the state's interests as they're defined in current Wyoming Community College Commission documentation, strategic plan are very, very broad, and everything that we assess, I think any of us could tie to the state's interests as they're articulated now. It is one of the key reasons why I've been asking the commission and commission staff, to really push their work on updating their strategic plan, because if that is supposed to provide the overarching direction for the colleges and for the state, we need that overarching direction. And right now, I worry that it may be too vague, that anything we do, we could essentially argue are in the state's interests.
Okay. Madam Chair, I had a couple
Sure.
of questions on the December 14th minutes.
Okay.
In there's some comments on 2A and 2AI, I believe it is. Competencies that are accessible and a master's syllabi. And maybe you would just talk just briefly about competencies that are accessible, and then what is the function of the master's syllabi?
Okay, them are really two separate issues. The Student Learning Assessment Committee has been working on some institutional competencies, and I'm not sure we all agree what that should be, a competency or an outcome, or we've had this discussion, but the things that a student should get when they're here at LCCC. There were 4 that were introduced based on a faculty-wide meeting where the faculty just sort of brainstormed what they thought students should get when they leave the institution, every student. And then 4 more were introduced, and so we've been having some discussions about that. And I think, myself and Laura Groh, who's the assessment coordinator, Meredith Rares, and Dr. Schaefer and Dr. Fierro all sit down and had a good discussion about these. And I think we're moving in the direction that there are a handful of those that faculty are really in agreement with, that are really accessible, that should be our institutional competencies. And then we're not sure what to call the others, but that we should come up with some parameters that sort of drive our gen ed requirements. And so I think the concern has been that these weren't competencies, that we couldn't assess them and measure them and determine if we've added any value to a student, right? And so I don't know where that's going. We'll have some more discussion. There's a faculty-wide forum I've scheduled for March 8th for faculty to come together and talk about these more. And it's both Dr. Fierro and Dr. Schaefer, I believe, are going to be there. So,
I would assume if we're talking value added that we may begin to look at some pre-test, post-test assessment.
I probably shouldn't have said that word because I'm not on that committee deciding what the assessment tools are. Certainly I have my own thoughts about that, but there's a committee working hard to come up, and that's their next step. This is why we want to get at least these institutional competencies approved and ready to go so they can start come up with some tools to use them. And so, and then as far as the, you asked me about the course syllabus, the master course syllabus.
Yes.
Right? That's something that Pat implemented, and I think it's a good exercise for us to review all of our curriculum. And his thoughts are every 4 years to review every course and come up with a master syllabus that that would be on file with the Vice President of Instruction. So if we have an adjunct or somebody who needs to, that it would have all the information they would need to be able to put together a course, and that we wouldn't veer from that master course syllabus that includes competencies that need to be assessed in every course. And every 4 years we'll take another look at them. And I think that's a good practice. We're sort of struggling right now because we're trying to do a bunch of them this semester. But I think once we get everything working, that this will just be a seamless, faculty will know that every course has to be reviewed, and it'll get on that rotation, and I think it'll be fine.
The last thing I would ask, you have 4 goals, the Faculty Senate has 4 goals that were mentioned, both I think in the 14th and also in the January minutes. I think they're great, and I was just wondering if you folks might look at giving us a mid, so to speak, year assessment, since those were brought forward in January. Maybe in June, we might get a intermediate assessment of progress on this.
Yeah, that's great, because I won't be here. Sure, I think that would be fine, and I could work with whoever my successor is to do that. I can tell you where them goals come from. It was my concern, I guess, and I'm the one who first initiated this last semester, that we were just sort of the sounding board for all the problems and complaints. And I said, that's good, we need that. That's what we're part of our role. We're supposed to be the sounding board for faculty and look into concerns, but let's set some sort of general goals of what we want to accomplish, and so that's where that came from. But yeah, I think we should be monitoring ourselves as well. So it's a practice we ought to be doing anyway. And so I'll work with Senate, and we'll talk about how we could monitor that, and we'll be happy to give a report on those goals.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Jeff. That was good.
Thanks.
Next, we have LCCEA, and Rachel Martinez is representing Les Balziger. Did I say that right? Sorry. Rachel, I know you have no.
We will have no report tonight. You're welcome.
Thank you for being here.
But Madam Chair, she has agreed to answer any tough questions that you can make up or think up.
Okay, any questions? Thank you, Rachel, for being here. Next, we have our president's reports. Dr. Schaefer.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Just a few updates. You had within your materials, I believe, a legislative update, 2 tracking sheets. The first one was a tracking sheet that's currently used by the Wyoming Community College Commission staff. Dr. Rose has been tracking that, and we've been having frequent conversations about legislation. The second portion, many of you have probably seen, distributed as part of the Wyoming Association of Community College Trustees. Steve Bamer puts that together. I will only touch on maybe a couple, really just to leave the time for you as trustees to ask questions, or perhaps even share some of what you know about the legislation. I know, for example, Trustee Mosier has been very involved with some of this legislation. The first one, though, I want to touch on is House Bill 1, which is the budget bill, the supplemental budget bill. My understanding that has found its way to the governor, and we are waiting his action on it. And nothing really changed within what's been advanced, 6% reduction in the state aid to the community colleges as we anticipated. For those of you that were tracking some of the conversation and debate whether or not the health insurance pool that is awarded to the Community College Commission and then used to reimburse the campus for their health insurance costs, there was considerable debate of whether or not that account should be reduced as well by the 6%. Should be kept where it's at. We went through an updated methodology of calculating and estimating what the cost would be for health insurance that essentially reduced the biennial budget from $38 million to $34 million. In the end, the recommendation is to leave it at the $30 million. Do not apply a cut to it because it is a reimbursement account and will naturally have that variability. So that went through. There was a footnote at one time regarding major maintenance and facilities that would be covered under major maintenance. There were some concerns because that footnote in the bill essentially took some of the facilities at LCCC that had been covered under major maintenance out. That footnote has been changed, and now all our facilities will be covered under major maintenance. You may recall me mentioning as well that in the governor's budget proposal, he had set aside about $11.5 million for some type of compensation for state employees. I believe approximately 3 of that, or 3.5 of that, was sort of carved off the top for performance pay for certain parts of Wyoming government. the rest to be doled out across the university, the community colleges, and other state agencies. The legislature did make some changes to that, and what you will find in there now is what they call a 1% retention incentive. Its intent is to be a one-time payment to employees. The language, to the best of our interpretation in the legislation, says that the portion that will come to the community college can be distributed at the discretion of the boards of trustees or the community colleges. Because of some of the ways they calculated, our best estimate at this point suggests that'll be about $130,000 that would come to LCCC for a retention incentive. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into the budget setting process. Other than that, I don't think there was anything very significant in the general appropriations in the budget bill, but we wait anxiously to see what the governor's actions are. I guess the one piece that I might want to share with another component of the supplemental budget, there is an element of it that basically asks that the state agencies come back in the next legislative session, the budget session, with proposals for 4%, 6%, and 8% reductions again. In fact, the legislation as it reads right now directs the governor to bring those proposals. You know, the governor is not required to adhere to legislative mandates. He'll bring a budget, and it can come in any framework. So we don't know what he will do in response to that, but there is still that tenor that perhaps we need to dig even deeper. We'll see how that plays out and have to monitor that to the best of our ability. Other than that, there's some other interesting legislation. As you heard at dinner, the House Bill 103, House Bill 105, dealing with the right for concealed carry permit holders to carry on college campuses, schools, and events, did die. And thank you all. Thank you, Trustee Mosier, for your work in helping the efforts there. I spent about 2 hours up at the Capitol this morning listening to House Bill 103 and 104 testimony and work by the committee. Both of those have moved on. The 103 is the one that basically preempts local governmental entities, political subdivisions, community college trustees from implementing any type of regulations that would be contrary to what state legislation or state law says about gun control. That did move forward and will be debated, I believe, if it makes it to the Senate floor. House Bill 103, though, is one that we've watched with more concern. House Bill, that is House Bill 103, I apologize, is the one that would preempt local control. That was amended considerably, and one of the amendments brought forth and suggested by the university, which we support, would essentially be to exclude the University of Wyoming community colleges and K-12 from that, which would still essentially mean that you could set rules and regulations for the oversight and management of the colleges, including restricting guns on campus and those types of things. At this point, and maybe an opportunity for pause to get your direction, Madam Chair, that legislation will go to the Senate. I would strongly recommend that you as a board take a stance that we have no concern with that bill if that amendment stays intact. Without that amendment intact, though, I would recommend that you as a board oppose that legislation, and I would look for direction from you, one, to direct me and give me the authority to work with our senators to make that point, that on behalf of the trustees, we support that amendment within that legislation, and if that amendment passes, we have no concern with the legislation. Without it, though, it essentially strips you of your authority to regulate anything pertaining to firearms on campus. So I would like some direction from you in regards to that. Quickly, House Bill 104 deals with the legislation that essentially says Wyoming Constitution, Wyoming law is the law of the land, and any gun control legislation or laws that are implemented by the federal government that are contrary to what we have here do not stand. And it even went as far as to say that any federal officer employee who tries to implement that legislation could be arrested and given a misdemeanor for doing that. Lots of conversation around that. It did pass. There were some amendments. I don't know what likelihood it has of passing in the Senate. And with that, I will just be quiet and hear what questions or comments you have on any of the legislation.
Madam
Trustee
Chair.
Kelty?
With regard to House Bill 103, it's already true that in Wyoming statute, it says that we may not pass any policy or procedure as a board that is contrary to Wyoming law. So I'm still having trouble trying to figure out why House Bill 103 is even pertinent with the way statute on community colleges is written. Maybe our attorneys can render an opinion on that, but
Madam Chair, Dr. Kilty, they could probably do a better job than I could. There was considerable discussion amongst the legislators who in their day lives are attorneys about that and about the confusion. And I think, if I remember correctly, there was something within the law that clouds that belief. There were people that argued it's already there, it's already worked. There are other people that would say no, it's not there, it's not strong enough, and in fact local governmental organizations, municipalities are already making those changes. There was considerable debate about whether or not the local boards or governmental subdivisions have regulatory authority, but also proprietary authority over facilities that they manage. So they referenced the legislation about the court and the judges having proprietary authority over the courtroom, and could they or could they not implement rules and regulations over that. And the same would hold true for proprietary authority over the college grounds. This legislation makes it clear that proprietary or regulatory, it doesn't matter. Local authorities do not have that. So in some ways they argued it was clarifying that, but I don't know, Gay, Deb, if you've even had a look or
I need to
thought.
research it a lot more.
Yeah.
Let's wait and see what happens. I'll give you a report next month if it continues.
Yeah.
Madam Chair,
Trustee Barger?
move that we support 103 as amended.
And that's what I was looking for. Would there be a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? Trustee Erickson?
Dr. Joe, could you describe this amendment a bit more? Because although I was listening, I'm not totally sure I'm clear as to what this motion is.
Brenda. Yeah, Madam Chair, Trustee Erickson, I probably didn't do a good job of explaining it because I don't know if I completely understand all the conversation with that.
Hey, Vicki, it's just me. Okay, thank you.
The first amendment that was brought forward and approved by the committee for this was to essentially exempt the community colleges, the University of Wyoming, and K-12 from that legislation, which essentially would mean that we could continue and you could continue to implement policies and rules that would still regulate firearms on our campus. That was essentially the amendment. It did not exclude city councils, county commissions, other types of governmental entities from that. So basically, well, I'll be honest, the 103, I don't know that I would support it one way or the other. With that amendment, it really doesn't impact us.
Any other questions? But you would like us to go ahead and support you with the amendment in place to take action for our board.
Madam Chair, members of the board, I would appreciate some direction, and I would recommend we take this stance, but some direction that I work with our senators and say we have concerns with this legislation. With that amendment passing, we have no concerns. Without it, that we would oppose it.
And I believe that was the motion, that we give you direction. Would you like to restate your motion, please, Ed?
I would to that effect, although I thought that's what it said.
Exactly.
Madam Chair, I have a motion for you. Let me state that.
Please.
That the board approves proceeding with asking Laramie County Senators to support amendment number 1 to House Bill 103, regulation of firearms hyphen state preemption, which would exclude University of Wyoming community colleges and K-12.
Do you need more? That's fine. Okay, we've had a, Dr.
Madam
Kilty?
Chair, I'm just wondering, the second part of this motion though, where without that amendment, we take a strong position against this bill, I'm uncertain about that. What are the practicalities of that? I mean, do we oppose some interests that really have good arguments or hold purse strings or anything like that?
Madam Chair, members of the board, two arguments that I would suggest. One of those is it does strip you of rights and responsibilities that the voters of Laramie County elected you essentially to carry out and govern for this institution. And number two, it sets a slippery slope precedent, as I think other trustees at other community colleges have argued, of where local control versus state control start to conflict. And you know, you've seen that conversation and argument playing out in the press as it relates to K-12 currently. This legislation, practically speaking, would essentially mean that if the legislature set laws regarding open carry, concealed carry on governmental entities in town, discharge in town, those types of things, you would not have the authority to implement policies or rules that would contradict that. The point you bring up, Dr. Kilty, regarding, you know, doesn't this already exist or doesn't exist? I can't answer that, and I think without research, my guess is that some of this will just have to play out in courts if and when the legislation moves forward.
Trustee Mosier?
I think, too, at this point in time, hearing many, many different comments from trustees and other folks at the hearings, one of the things that I feel concerned about is we as a board have responsibility for trying to provide as safe an environment as we can, and there are limits to that. But I would like to see us have more time. I don't think we're ready for this bill or a bill of this nature, so that even we could review, as I'm sure, and I spoke to Dr. Schaefer about that, there has been a review of our security, and there's an ongoing review of that as to what we can do, how we can make this a safer campus. And I think, you know, we need some time to understand what we can, what we can't do, and what level of security we are providing and what changes we might make. Some of the other colleges provide, well, I shouldn't say some, only one, I believe it's Gillette. Well, Gillette and Sheridan. Northwest College or Northern College. They provide some really interesting rules about if you have concealed carry, you check in, and they make some determination about that. But they really try to provide, I think, protection for Second Amendment rights. But they do try to control the security of that environment to some degree. And that, to some degree, is what bothers me, because I don't know would our liability go up. I don't know if we're looking at, if we don't provide certain levels of regulating firearms to some degree, do we have a higher liability? I don't know. So those are kinds of things I'd like to see be studied and give us information on. And at this point in time, I'm not ready to support the bill, because that's my perspective, is I want a chance to look at this more in depth and see what the impact would be. There's a lot of rhetoric right now and not a lot of such things as what the law already says. I'd like to have those things clarified. Then maybe we need law like that.
Madam Chair, members of the board, perhaps the way to phrase that is, and could support that we encourage passage of the amendment. Without that, you as trustees have concerns with the legislation.
I think that would be great, yeah.
I'd be more than happy to make that friendly change if the second would want to.
Thank you.
Well, I thought that's what we said, basically, so yeah,
You're willing to modify it?
whatever.
Whatever the first one wants.
Trustee Erickson.
The amendment applies to all governmental bodies. Well, maybe I'm getting confused about the bill and then the amendment. The bill applies to all governmental bodies, county commissioners, city councils, but we're now saying, well, it's okay for this bill to do something to the counties and to the cities, but we don't want it to affect us.
Madam Chair, Trustee
If that is the
Erickson.
case, I have a problem with that.
Well, that's the American way.
We are saying, I'm proposing that with that amendment, we do not have a dog in that fight. You could certainly argue that, again, the slippery slope, the consequences down the road may lead to other conversations, but what I'm suggesting with that amendment, we wouldn't stand up and oppose the legislation, I guess is what I'm saying.
Trustee Kelty.
President Joe, this is maybe a totally unrelated item, but, you know, you've talked about this legislation interrupting our ability to control our campus and provide for a safe environment. Yet for a very long time, we've had one security officer out here at night quite often. And that seems to me that that's a bad situation right there, and we're not doing a very good job of controlling the environment, you know, with respect to safety well in that manner. I mean, I've been out here at 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning, and there are strange goings on in places that keep one security officer running around in places that things ain't going on.
What were you doing?
Answer?
Well, you know, there's a perfectly good explanation, and that is that I had engineering students out here one night in the winter, and we were doing thermal studies on how the various buildings perform thermally. Now, that's not funny. I could have said something glib like, well, I was avoiding that security officer. But you know, that's just an example where we're taking a strong stand on something that disturbs our ability to control safety on the campus, and yet we're not doing some other basic things maybe. Do we have 2 officers out here at all times now?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Trustee Kilty, standard practice is to have 2 officers on duty at all times.
Good.
With that. And at a future meeting, I've asked our new security director to campus safety director to come and give you an update on some of the things that they're working on, and we're making inroads. It is an interesting point, though, and I think to Trustee Mosier's comments here, there are solutions to improving this type of legislation, addressing the concerns of campus safety, because that's, you know, really in many ways, I think that's what we're after with a lot of this, improving our own safety as well as safety of the environments. We need to be part of those conversations, and we have not been part of the conversations associated with this legislation. Folks would argue, though, this legislation really clarifies and makes it clear across the state who sets the laws, the rules, and regulations as it pertains to firearms. And that's what House Bill 103 is really trying to get at. It's all the other implications of what does that mean for the authority of locally elected boards, so on and so forth. The example used today that was brought up was the cell phone laws. So in Cheyenne, when you enter Cheyenne, you cannot talk on your cell phone while you're driving. Other communities in the state where you can. And how do we know when we enter Cheyenne if it's the state legislation or not? And so, you know, the logical person would say, yeah, it sure makes sense if we just had one size fits all and we could do that. Here's the danger, though, with that. It's that type of conversation then that local municipalities would not have the ability to make that type of regulation. And if it's firearms right now, down the road they say, no, we believe you can talk on your cell phone, and too bad. What does that do for local authority and local control? And those are the questions we just don't know until we have those conversations, and I think that's what we want to have. So that was not an attempt to get away from your question. We are working on campus safety and have lots of things to do here. This just pertains to legislation. My hope is that we can convince our senators to amend the bill as passed out of committee, at least with that first amendment, and that gives us some time to enter into those conversations. My understanding is the sponsors of this type of legislation are willing and would like to sit down and have conversations in the interim, and I think that may get us to where we want, because in many ways we share common interests, common beliefs that we say are at the foundation of this, but as I say, the devil's in the details.
Madam Chairman, I read the bill while we were talking, and it is to prohibit local government from making any type of regulations with regard to firearms. And yes, if we ask for this amendment, it would be exempting schools from that. The answer is yes.
I'll have to speak against the motion, because to me, I think it sends the wrong signal. It's okay for the cities and the municipalities and the counties to have this law, but we should be exempt. If we're against anyone getting after home control, home rule, local control, this amendment, I think, is giving the wrong, I think it's giving the wrong signals. I think we should be opposed to the bill rather than being opposed to the bill with the amendment.
Madam Chair, Trustee Erickson, and members of the board, Trustee Mosier, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the stance that the WACCT took and directed Steve Bamer, the executive director, to actually stand in opposition to the legislation.
Yes.
Well, that's fine for them to say that, but we're our own little body here, and we're expressing where we feel we should go on this particular bill. And I'm just saying, I may not be, might not be part of the consensus here, but I just cannot vote for the motion.
Madam Chair, Trustee Erickson, I work at the leisure of the board, and if the board so choose to direct me to oppose it, regardless of the amendments, I'd be happy to carry that out as well.
There is a motion on the table, and there is a second, and I would call for the question. All those in favor of this motion, please say aye.
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 So I heard 3.
I voted aye too, Carol.
I heard you, Brenda. That's great. And those opposed?
Nay. Nay.
Did you vote? Are you going to vote? Okay, the motion passes, I guess, with 3 positive votes. Ed?
And Brenda and Bill, yes.
Yes.
1 abstention.
Yes.
Christine.
And 2 against. Erickson and Kilty.
Might I add just a point? Don, I agree with you that the whole thing is, but I don't feel we have the right to be telling the cities and towns and county what they should do and what they shouldn't do. I just don't think that's our policy. We're trustees at the college. This is our business. This is our place. And that's why I voted for it. I'm against the whole thing. I'm totally against it. But I just don't think it's our place to tell them what to do.
That wasn't any, excuse me, Madam Chair, that wasn't any part of the input of my message. My message was not to tell the cities and the counties what to do, but I do not want to see the state tell the cities and the counties what to do. Just like we're saying we don't want them to tell us what to do. But if you tell the rest of them what to do, that's okay, as long as we're exempted. That's why I voted against it.
It's
But
a
the vote's
semantic
over.
thing.
Okay.
It's a semantic.
Well, thank you very much. And Dr. Schaefer, do you have more?
Madam Chair, members.
Madam Chair, could I just catch one thing? that
Trustee
fits what we
Mosier?
did? And I know Dr. Schaefer helped work those logistics out, but I want to say that our president, Mike, did an excellent job also in speaking at the committee hearing. And it was kind of nice because the Associated Student Government President from UW also spoke. And Mike didn't get a chance to hear him. It was very crowded. We traded seats and we're playing tag to get in and out of there. But the point I wanted to make is that Mike, very shining relative to the speech also given by the student from Wyoming. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you. President Schaefer?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. You know, just after the conversation regarding Faculty Senate and some of the other things, I thought it might be worthwhile to update you, and I'm changing my mind, thinking I'd like to do this in a subsequent report, but there are considerable conversations and work that's going on at the college. It sounds like at least some of you have interest in some of those areas, specifically within the academic affairs arena, and I'd be happy to come back, and perhaps at that time we can formally introduce Dr. Fierro and put him up at the bully pulpit up there to talk a little bit about the things that are going on. But there's considerable work on academic policies pertaining to degrees and certificates, general education, institutional competencies, curriculum management, moving towards a consolidated electronic curriculum management system, looking at the overall schedule and calendar, course minimums, course capacities as we try to manage our programs, program review, faculty development. There's considerable work going on at the institution, and if you are interested, I'd be happy to come back to you with a more formalized report specifically focusing on the work that we're doing in the academic affairs arena.
I believe this board would be interested in that information.
Okay.
Thank you.
With that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions, but that concludes my report.
Are there any questions? I guess we'll have questions later. Okay. Board reports, capital campaign, Bill Du Bois and Don Erickson. And the team is here. If you need, you have a report?
Well, I guess I'm supposed to say something about this.
We don't have an hour, but you did a great job
I was
earlier.
invited to a meeting at 5 o'clock with Lisa and Dan, and we reviewed a couple of things about the campaign. They have put some materials together. In my opinion, they have thoroughly thought through a good action plan. I think this action plan is going to be presented tomorrow to the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how much you want me to speak about it tonight. Do you want some type of confirmation from the board about that action plan that will be presented to the foundation tomorrow?
Madam Chair, Trustee Erickson, as you see later on in your agenda, there is an action item and a discussion about the bond election, the special election, as well as a
Okay,
presentation.
so we'll hold it
So we'll
off
do
to
that
then.
Yes.
Okay, so what do you want from me now?
I just want to comment that Trustee Erickson did an excellent job during that meeting, which I also attended, and so I think he's going to be one of the leaders in this campaign. So thank you, Trustee Erickson.
Is that buttering me up for
No,
something?
that's straight talk.
What's happening here? Also, there were a couple of other things that occurred last business meeting or study session. I'm not sure. They just fade from one to another. But I asked about the survey. I asked about the urban and rural fparticipation in the survey. And I think we had a response to that by Mr. Frederick, and he had indicated that on the ballot, let's see, the rural folks are, however, a lot more negative toward the bond taxes than just about everything. That's not my comment, that's quote unquote. On the ballot language vote, rural voters are 65%. 66% no on the concept test. I wonder if that should be text on the concept text. They are 47% no and 44% yes. So, and then this compares to 31% no and 65% yes among urban voters, which is something that I had expected would be coming forward, which indicates that an outreach to the rural area of our county is essential. Then the other question had to do with how many individuals that responded or did not respond to the survey. They had 300 completes, of which there were an additional 156 straight refusals to talk. 59 who did not pass our internal screens, and a bunch more we just could not get to because of answering machines. So I did get the information that I had asked for at the last meeting.
Thank you, Trustee Erickson. Dan, will everyone get a copy of this during your presentation?
Yes.
Okay, it's an
All the board
excellent
members,
document.
I'm sure.
Okay, thank you very much. So that will conclude the capital campaign. Folks, there's strategic planning. Bill Du Bois and Ed Mosier, please.
At this point, we have not yet met. I think Dr. Schaefer at some point will bring us together and we'll move forward on that.
It sounds like it's going to be a spring event. Yes, Joe.
Yes,
Shue.
ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. Finance and Facilities, Dr. Kilty and Trustee Mosier. Report?
I'm gonna let Ed handle that. He attended the meeting. I had other business to attend to that morning.
Were you doing some thermal imaging at that time or something?
I was on a super secret mission that I cannot reveal.
Oh. Okay, well, the folks in the budget office and Dr. Schaefer were kind enough to put up with me on that morning, and we talked about the budget process. And I again would emphasize that the time frame is challenging, I think, for everyone, because you've got everything else you're doing. And I understand that by February 26th, the council, I think, will have had a chance to look at the data that's come in from all the different areas. And on March 12th, we'll get to look at some of that information in our study session on the budget. Is that right, Vicki? At the April? Okay. And then, no, nothing significant with regards to the review of the financial statements. On the third item that we looked at was major maintenance, improvement projects, new buildings. Tim has been progressing quite satisfactorily with his crew and the work they're doing on the maintenance. I would suggest that probably in about a month, when the weather gets a little better, we'll not only hear, but we'll see a little bit more about what's going on in that area. One of the things I asked Tim about, and Dr. Schaefer alluded to it earlier, in terms of the relationship with the state building folks in terms of major maintenance, because if I understood Tim correctly, I would report to you that that role is being more and more, maybe I shouldn't use the word usurped, but I think in reality they're taking on a greater responsibility as far as major maintenance. We still will be controlling, I think, most of the aspects of that, but I think some of that's slipping away a little bit, and that concerns me. And I don't know if you would like to speak to that just a little bit, Dr. Schaefer.
Madam Chair, Trustee Mosier, members of the board, I don't know that if I have a lot to add there. I think what we're watching is sort of a changing landscape as it pertains to capital construction, major maintenance, and really facilities. You have essentially 4 different groups, 5, I guess, that are involved in the process. You as the Board of Trustees, the Wyoming Community College Commission, the State Building Commission, the governor, and then ultimately the legislature. And some of the responsibilities are shifting. We saw this session in Senate File 77, which I believe is still alive, which moves some of the capital construction and major maintenance elements out of the commission to construction management. So I would say, if anything, it's the uncertainty of all the dynamics and the change that we're concerned with. We're just trying to manage, I think.
Okay, appreciate that. And as we'll probably talk about a little later, I'd asked some questions at the previous board meeting, the study session, about a welder, and yes, it's not a welder, but rather a welding simulator that was in fact purchased with Perkins money. And I didn't ask, but would you clarify for me, if it's bought that way, then that $30,000 requirement for the board to look at is not in place. Is that right?
Madam Chair, Trustee Mosier, that is a good question. And I'm struggling to recollect the leading up to that, if that was some things associated with grant funds and what we were doing there. But, and I see Carol used the excuse as whether to leave. So it's a good question. I will find out for you. It does bring up the other question. We need to work on policy, reestablishing that since you're shifting governance models. And I've asked Vice President Hoagland to do that. I will follow up, but we do need to clarify that and put that on the book. So one, I'll get moving on that. Two, I will find out how and why we move forward with that, if there was some other prior approval or something else.
Okay. And that was the meeting that you missed.
Fascinating.
Thank you, Ed.
Chair?
Oh,
May I
Trustee
ask
Ferguson?
Ed a question? Or,
Of course.
Ed and Kevin? The financial report that you sent out with the balance sheet and also the revenues for the last, 7 months, are we going to receive these on a monthly basis now? Or do you normally distribute this information at the business meeting every month?
Madam Chair, I'll go ahead and answer
Trustee
that.
Kilby?
We receive it on a monthly basis. We distribute it to the board on a monthly basis. And I think we did miss 1 month recently, but I don't remember the reason for that. But it's typically monthly.
Okay, you missed we didn't have a meeting in December, but missed January.
We missed 1 month because of some circumstance that I do not remember.
We got only one of those 2 reports because Harry Andrews was out of town.
That's-
to prepare this.
Okay.
That's it.
But it is the practice for us to receive it on a monthly basis.
It is.
Any other questions? Bill, do you have a report from the ACCT meeting that you went to?
Well, you all have a copy of it, and I'm not going to sit here and read it to you. If you're interested, please read it, and if not, don't worry about it. But Joe said he wanted me to say a few things. Excuse me, President Schaefer said he wanted me to. It was a very fine conference. I was the only one from this college, but there was somebody from every college in Wyoming. And interestingly enough, in Northern College in Sheridan, they brought 2 students, which might be something to consider in days ahead. The first days were with excellent speakers. I mean, obviously, not everybody would agree with everything they said, but the focus always was on the Health Education Act, which comes to an end in 2013, and what the various parts of it, of course, include the Pell, the Perkins, the Gear Up program, the TRIO program, and all of this is all part of that Higher Education Act. And so all of that together is very interesting as to how it's going to come about. And so I think it was good we went and called on our congressional delegation, all 3 of them. Of course, you know, in Wyoming you only have 3, so it's not like some states that have 20 people to try and visit with, you know. And so it made it nice to be able to visit our 3 who welcomed us very nicely. And the 14 of us all went together as a team, and each of us, we had met the day before, and each of us had our own assignment, and so on. Obviously, there's a tremendous amount of discussion with the workforce development programs and the great need for them and the great need that industry needs. And also, there's was a lot what we've talked about and had that big meeting in the fall, that's completion agenda and the certificate idea and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So these were the things we talked about, and there also was an emphasis on the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which needs to be strengthened. And of course, this would help take care of the problems we have. And I guess we're not supposed to ever use the word remedial, as she told us that day, but you know what I'm talking about.
We do. Thank you, Bill.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Trustee Mosher.
just to add one thing to what Bill said when he mentioned the two students that came from Sheridan.
Yeah.
It was something that was discussed by the Wyoming Association of Community College Trustees that perhaps each year one of the colleges will take a student or two to this conference, because again, that it's always good in terms of the legislative group and good PR for us in that respect. And I don't know, I would assume the presidents might know who's next in line, because I don't remember who would be next up.
Madam Chair, Trustee Mosier, it's always a struggle to assume. I don't know. I recall the conversation. The presidents continue to encourage the trustees to lead the way on ACCT types of activities, but I will follow up, because I do believe we set direction, or the trustees gave us direction on who that would be. I actually think it was Sheridan that brought students last year as well, or was it Western?
I think it was Western last year.
So there's a 1 in 5 chance that we're next.
Thank you, and thank you, Bill. We'll move to the approval items. I want to direct your attention to the yellow slip here on your paper. The process for handling action items will follow that format. And I want to tell you also that this confused me. I said to Joe, who is staff, when it says staff recommendation, and Joe said it was he himself, the president of the college.
I am your staff, yes.
He is our staff. And so, just for clarification, okay, what I'm going to do now is to move B, capital campaign action plan, to the top of the list, please. And we have some really great guests here tonight as part of the team. Billy Eidelman, George McIlvain, please stand up. I'm calling on you as our distinguished foundation folks. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Lisa. And Dan Baxter.
And Jeff.
Todd.
Todd.
Todd, I
We
meant.
call him Todd.
I had all
He's part of the
five. I couldn't
team.
remember.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, thank you, and thank you for recognizing George McIlvain. He is the Vice President of the Foundation Board, and we so appreciate him, and Billy Adelman as well. They have both volunteered to be on our steering committee should this project go through. So we want to thank them very much for being here tonight, and thank you for moving us up on the agenda. Thank you very much. The Foundation Board will be meeting tomorrow night and discussing whatever happens here tonight, so the timing is very well played. So the board had several questions that you wanted to have addressed, and we have provided some materials for you. In your packet, you have before you an action plan. It is a proposed action plan, and as Trustee Erickson mentioned, we did sit down and have a chance to go through that tonight, and I really appreciate his time. And I also have a timeline. It's a proposed timeline that was put together by Kaiser, both Dan Baxter and Todd Bishop, and I appreciate that very much. So if you're interested in that, I can also pass that around. And then the other thing that you all had asked for from us was a better worded ballot language. And so they have also put that together. That is the pink sheet that you have before you. So those are the things that you had asked us for. We have those materials ready for you, and we stand ready to answer any questions that you might have tonight.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Does the board have any questions of our capital campaign folks?
I don't have any questions, but I have some comments.
Yes.
That I'd like to share that we had today in our sort of pre-business meeting session. Madam Chair and I and Dan and Lisa met for about an hour to review these documents. And I had a couple of suggestions which I'd like to share with the group. And that is that I think an outreach is essential over and above the faculty, the staff, the students, an outreach into all sectors of our county. And I suggested that we have something like a Friends of LCCC, a structure that would have volunteers working on this campaign in every precinct within the county. There are 61 precincts. There are 6 wards, or districts, I guess is the correct, six districts. And I'm suggesting that we have an organization of friends for LCCC. Lisa thought that was a good idea, and that we will share that with the foundation tomorrow. Another thing I felt was going to be would be useful is to have a series of open houses where all the elected officials in the county, cities, county commissioners, even appointed officials, be invited to, say, a Saturday open house where there'd be maybe a snack at 10 o'clock and a presentation, a little PowerPoint presentation of why we're doing what we're doing, and then tours for these individuals throughout the college. And to expand that to the Friends of LCCC. In other words, the structure that's going to go out, and I see that structure as being the people that are going to go out and go door to door to provide the material to all the citizens of Laramie County. And then one other one would be just an open house for the public at large, to invite them and let them see what's going on out here at the college. I was impressed with the amount of work that Mr. Baxter put into this particular action plan, and I'm sure that Lisa and her folks were involved with some of the massaging of it as well. But I think it looks good. I did share that I have a concern about our capability to achieve all this by a November special election. I'm not speaking against the special election. I'm just saying I think that there's a lot of work, a great deal of commitment by a number of people that needs to come forward in order to get this information to the far reaches of this county, especially when we got the information out of that survey that you get out in the rural area and you got 65% that said no to that survey questionnaire that went out here in the end of January, I believe. So we got a lot of work to do. I look forward to, with Bill and anyone else from the trustees that wish to participate, to work on this effort. In fact, I said this once before, one of the reasons I ran for the board is to see what I can do to assist to make this particular campaign successful.
Thank you, Trustee Erickson.
However, I'll have to say one other thing.
Yes.
If it is successful, I won't want to leave. I still want to stay.
I'm not going to cut your tenure short. Oh, thank you very much. Do any of the trustees have any questions? Does any of the public or faculty or staff have any questions? This is way too easy. Okay, I guess I am going to, I think I'll read this staff recommendation, the president's recommendation, that the Laramie County Community College Board of Trustees formally express their intent to call for a special election asking the voters of Laramie County to support the funding of the Flex Tech and University Student Center building project, and directs the president to proceed with a campaign to inform the community of these projects. Could I have
so move.
Did you want to say
Second.
something first? Oh, Brenda seconded.
Chris seconded.
No. Christie's second.
Christine?
Yes, Christine
Seconded? I'm sorry, I heard a voice. Sorry. Lisa, did you want to say something?
We were just wondering, Madam Chair, if our Vice President of the Foundation Board would like to make any comments. George, would you like to make any
George.
comments? Oh, okay, thank you.
Karen, I might need your phone again in a minute.
I'm sorry, Brenda?
She had to leave the phone a minute.
Okay,
I'm sorry. My phone's about ready to run out of battery, so I'm trying to find another one.
okay, thank you, Brenda. George, would you like to make a comment?
Not really. I I think you'll be hearing from the foundation quite a bit between now and November. So I don't think there's anything to bring up at this point.
Perfect. Okay, we'll have an open board discussion of the motion, but I think we have said everything that we wish to say at this time. I would like to call for the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Thank you. That motion carries. That was easy, wasn't it?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You did a great job. You're doing a great job. Thank you, everyone here.
Do you want me to ask them if they want those?
Thank you. And now you may go home, if you would like. Yes,
You're welcome.
Madam Chair,
yes, you're welcome to stay. Lisa, yes?
Mr. Baxter does have those materials for you.
Oh, yes.
Should the board members like those?
Dan Baxter has some excellent materials.
Thank you. That's okay.
And I thought about, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye. See you tomorrow night. And now I will expedite D, the approval of the amendment to the letter of intent with the Heinz Capital Corps project. We're moving you up. Sure.
Madam Chair, members of the board, we had a fairly lengthy discussion about this at your study session. I don't know that I have any additional comments. Would be happy to answer any questions. And I see Mr. Ohashi may have a few comments and would also be available for questions.
Yes. Mr. Ohashi?
Well, I really don't have much to add. You discussed it, we talked about it briefly at the study session, but this extension allows us to continue to move forward. We'll be going through the on-campus focus group information that was generated, and that will help inform some focus groups that we plan to convene relative to the community. And the on-campus focus groups focused in on what happened on the inside of the building, and we'll be doing some community-based focus group activity to determine, what the impact will be outside of the building. We'll be working also with President Schaefer's staff to kind of figure out what we're going to get and how much this whole thing is going to cost. So it's kind of an important step for us, and we hope we'll be able to work with you as we move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Ohashi. Are there any questions from the board? No questions from the board? Any questions or comments from the faculty or staff or student? Okay. What is your pleasure? May I have a motion, please?
Well, I so move, but I can't say it all in the right words.
Okay, let me read here what it says.
So,
That the Board of Trustees approves amending the original letter of intent for the exploration of student housing downtown as part of the Heinz Capital Corps project, and directs the President to submit the accompanying amendment to the original letter of intent on behalf of the Board.
Second.
Is there any more discussion?
Madam Chair,
Trustee Erickson?
as I understand, the amendment is actually a clarification of additional activities that are going to occur,
basically.
right? Yeah. There's no commitment from the Board of Trustees to enter into any other management agreement. It's just to start doing these items that are listed 1 through 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Madam Chair, Trustee Erickson, that is correct. It extends the timeline that we had set with the first letter of intent to allow for us to carry out these additional activities, and some of them, like the student focus groups, are just the extensions of the initial student assessment of their interest and need in downtown housing, but at this point does not commit you to anything.
Question?
Call for the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? The motion passes. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn. Now we will move to approval item A, policies. And that would be Dr. Schaefer.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, just some brief comments regarding policies and procedures. We did the big push with the governance policies and procedures and some of the critical ones, but we'll continue to do that work in regards to policy and procedures, and those will come forward to you. I'm happy to again describe the policy development and approval process, policy procedure development and approval process. That is one of the policies that you've already approved. But what you will see as we move the development of policy and procedure through the internal campus processes that include originating bodies, the President's Cabinet, out for consultative feedback, College Council, and then policy after my approval on to you. You'll start seeing these policies come forward. We've also referenced the accompanying procedure if you have interest in seeing how we plan to uphold your policy as it's proposed. And so you'll be seeing more of these in the future as we continue our policy work. These two policies are fairly straightforward. One is the general admissions policy. You'll see some similarity, in fact, quite a bit of similarity from previous versions, and also transfer of credit policies. With that, Vice President Judy Hay is here, could answer any questions, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well.
Does the board have questions? Trustee Kelty?
You know, I don't know that I have a lot of questions on these two policies. I read through them, but one thing that crossed my mind and I was a little curious about, you talked in the policies about not requiring high school transcripts of anyone who already has a bachelor's degree and seeks admission here. And I was just curious, why the bachelor's degree and why not an associate's degree, someone who already has an associate's degree?
Actually, it does include the associate degree. It
So
says a
if someone
degree
has
from-
an associate degree, then you don't ask for
Yes.
high school transcripts?
Right.
Okay. I didn't think that was the way it read. I looked at it and was just curious about that.
Yes, I'll find the language right here if I can, fast. It's in the process under students seeking a degree or certificate, new students to be fully admitted as degree-seeking students. All new students are required to submit an application for admission. In addition, applicants must submit official college transcripts if they have taken any college classes prior to applying to Laramie County Community College, or official high school or GED transcripts. Transfer students to be fully admitted as degree-seeking students. Transfer students are required to submit an application and official transcripts from all previous colleges attended. Students who have earned a bachelor's degree from an accredited college. Ooh, this is maybe not the right version.
Yeah.
We did make that change, and I'll straighten that around because that was a point of pretty big discussion.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Thank you, Jim. Trustee.
Thank you. In line with the same issue, how do we handle foreign students?
They have to go through a whole process with the immigration.
So if they had a bachelor's degree, is what I'm thinking here, do we have any language that it's from an accredited? Is there any reason to do it that way, or do you have that in the other?
They have to submit, in the transfer of credit policy, they have to have their transcripts go through a service that they pay for, because we don't have a good way of understanding every country in the world's academic programs and their higher ed system. So they would always come through that service.
So we know, even domestic, we would know that that's an accredited institution through the service provided for the foreign students and for domestic?
Accreditation systems in foreign countries, I would say no, we don't have that same understanding or guarantee that we would with the regional accreditation in this country.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, this sort of brings up another issue that I considered here with these. It seems to me that that the president's signature really shouldn't be added to these until after the board has actually adopted them. And I'm rereading back to the actual approval process, and I'm seeing that he moves it forward, but not necessarily that he would have already signed it. And since we have a change on this one, it'd be easier if it was signed after today, so.
Madam Chair, members of the board, just for clarification, I believe your comments and what you're referencing is actually a procedure. Procedures do not come to board for approval. Those are handled internally. So if you're looking at the procedure, it would have my signature on that. The policies do come forward to the board for approval. The domain of the board is policy, and you'll see even on the policies that have come forward, my name on there is simply a recommendation to the board. The boards would have the authority over setting the policy. Then our work is to implement procedures that illustrate how we are keeping the intent of the policy up. And the reason we bring the policy forward and give you the link to the procedure is because this is valuable feedback and conversation. But this was the mechanism that Trustee Kaiser at the time and Trustee Little suggested as we move forward with the new governance shift to clarify the board's domain and policy, and then my charge to make sure we have procedures and administrative activities meeting that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the board? Are there any comments or questions from the faculty or staff? Or the public? Or anyone? Okay, I'm going to read the recommendation that the Laramie County Community College Board of Trustees approves the general admissions and transfer of credit policies as presented. I would like to call for the question.
Do we have a motion?
I need a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, trustee. A second, please?
Second.
And now I will call for the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? I think not. Thank you. Motion carries.
Madam Chairman, I'm not sure this is the place for me to ask this question. A couple of meetings back, there was a little discussion about the vision statement in our policies. And I'm reluctant to, Roz, you got up and said, hey, well, come on, let's get going, let's approve this. And then I think a comment was made that, well, we can always revisit this vision statement sometime down the road. One of the things I saw in that vision statement is that it seems to have, if I may, is this appropriate for me to speak on this?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. There seems to be a diminishing of an emphasis of career. And I didn't notice in the vision statement career. It does say academics, it does say the trades, professional, and so forth. And I suspect that maybe professional, some people might consider the careers to be subsumed within profession, but all professions are careers, but not all careers are professions. Professions has a body of knowledge, it has a code of ethics, and so some of our educational activities out here are more careers than they are professions. So I'm just suggesting that we revisit, if you wish, that particular statement and add career in that list of the academics, and the profession and career. I just didn't know where to bring that up, but came back here and you said at one time, well, you can always bring it up whenever you wish, so here it is.
Madam Chair, Trustee Erickson, members of the board, I do remember that conversation, and and I believe what we left that conversation with is we would look at and at least have the conversation about the vision statement as we enter the strategic planning process. And so points well taken. We'll get them in the record, and certainly there'll be opportunity for you to provide that input, and we'll look at that as part of the strategic planning process.
And thank you. And that is how I remember it, that Roz Shalisky said that they had worked hard on the mission and vision statements, and that we thought that we would leave the mission statement intact and work on the vision statement along with the strategic plan. So I remember that as well. But thank you for bringing that up. Okay, moving on to C, approval of the pilot program in welding, and that would be done by President Schaefer and Vice President Torvik.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'll just make some brief introductory comments here. Vice President Torvik is here as well to answer any questions. As you recall from your study session and from conversations prior to that in regards to the building expansion addition to the CTE building, what we're proposing is that you approve the college starting as a pilot program in welding that would be stackable. In other words, have a certificate in the first year, an Associate of Applied Science degree in the second year. And we're asking your approval to do that on a pilot basis, as we will be asking the Commission's approval to offer that on a pilot basis. Within that time, or within 2 years, we have to seek and gain full approval by you as a Board of Trustees and the Wyoming Community College Commission to offer that into perpetuity. The pilot process allows us, one, to expedite the startup and respond to what we believe will be growing demand in our region, and two, allow us to quite honestly test the long-term feasibility of the welding program and to ascertain whether or not those needs will truly present themselves. I think that is probably the largest crux with this program at this time, is that the majority of the anticipated need is just that. It's anticipated in southeast Wyoming. Of all the sectors, we aren't seeing the need that's happening in the Gillette area, even in the Casper, southwestern Wyoming. But working closely with local organizations like LEADS, talking to employers, both those who are pending location here in Cheyenne and already existing, we do believe that a need will present itself. By moving forward with a pilot project, we always have the opportunity to say the need has not presented itself, but it also allows us to start the program so that we ensure we have graduates when that need arises, versus waiting until there's the demand and then delaying that for another 2 years to be able to provide the workforce that those folks are looking for. So Vice President Torvik and Mary Ellen Tast took a stab and did some very good work at trying to put together a business plan or a prospectus for this program. You have that provided. There's lots of good information in there, and I think I would rather just be quiet and hear what questions you have.
I don't believe I have the prospectus. Is it?
It's on the.
It's on the, okay.
Yeah, it
fine.
is. You can see it there. Madam Chair,
Trustee Kelty.
I've got a number of questions that come under several different categories, so I'll just start with the budget issues. Randy Calhoun has indicated that the welding program is fairly expensive, and one of the things I was curious about is whether or not $20,000 is really enough money in the budget for supplies. Randy didn't ever really provide any number, and of course, what one person might view as expensive, another one would view as maybe not expensive. But is that a hard number, and what was it based on?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Dr. Kilty, and I'll ask Stan to clarify for me if I missed this. That was actually based on conversations with the program director at Gillette College to try to get an idea of what types of student fees they assess and what they believe their operating expenses have been, and that's really where that number was originated from. As you know, the steel market, the metal market is volatile, and so that is our best guess based off of what they've informed and what we believe the local prices would be to provide those materials for the program. Is that fair, Stan?
That's correct.
Okay. My next question comes from the text of the business plan versus the table on page 9. And the business plan says 15 students in year 1, 25 in year 2. The table on page 9 says 0 in year 1 and 15 in year 2.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Dr. Kilty, that just illustrates there's a 4-year operating plan. Year 1 in the budget illustrates essentially the startup year, which we're in right now. That will conclude. We actually won't be operating the program until FY14, but there are encumbrances that we have in the current fiscal year, and we just wanted to illustrate that. So for practical purposes of the operations of the program, year 2 through year 5 illustrate the 4-year operating plan for the program.
Okay. My next question is on the startup year. The text says startup funds of $472,000. The table on page 9 says $460,000. Is that just a discrepancy there? And if it's just a discrepancy, let's go on. One other that I found interesting was we're planning to pay the full-time faculty at $73,000 a year, but then we've got a 3/4 time FTE adjunct. We're only budgeting $17,000 for a 3/4 time FTE adjunct. It seemed peculiar to me. I would just think that an adjunct would have to have an awful lot of the same skill as the instructor, yes?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Dr. Kilty, the primary differentiator there is the benefits package. With the full-time faculty, we're paying health insurance and all the benefits associated with it, whereas adjunct, we're paying per credit without those benefits. It is a good point, though, because one of the things we do not know yet, especially as we get into double cohorts, whether or not these courses would be taught as a block, or if we would actually have to have course sequences that would spread an individual faculty member and what we estimate for adjuncts too far, and would it require that we actually add additional adjuncts? So if there's any variability in here, it may be that the adjunct expenditures in year 4 and 5 may be higher than what we anticipate. But right now, those calculations are based off of average adjunct wages versus what we anticipate hiring a full-time faculty with benefits for. And then just one other thing, just even though you told me to move on, the discrepancy between page 8 and page 9 is that I included $12,000 in there that really won't be encumbered until FY14. And so when you look at the difference, that $12,000 is really intended to be in the FY14 year 2 budget, and that's the difference between the 472 and the 460.
I just noticed in the budget there was nothing for equipment replacement or anything like that, and that may be entirely appropriate here, but I just would like to maybe make a sort of generic comment here that throughout this campus for a long time, we've never had equipment replacement budgets, and we just depend from time to time on one-time money showing up, and we fix all the broken stuff at that point. And isn't it just a better budget process to start building sinking funds to replace stuff that we know we're going to have to? And would there be some sort of a figure in this for exactly that purpose?
Madam Chair, Dr. Kilty, you are touching on a conversation that we have been having. We had it last year, but more now that we're developing the budget. It is, in my belief, good practice to have a variety of types of reserves. Right now we have various mechanisms and almost what I would think of as mini reserves spread throughout the institution that are intended to do that. We are working, and I'm a fan of actually consolidating that and strategically having, whether you call it a sinking fund or a reserve account specifically for equipment cycling. I know we charge fees and we have a reserve in dental hygiene, I believe, for the cycling of that equipment. We treat copiers differently, so I agree.
Madam Chair, may I proceed?
Yes, you may proceed.
The next thing I'd sort of like to approach is the source of funds to start this project. And $360,000 plus of that is going to come from 1 mil fund. Now, the board has had a discussion about this 1 mil fund for a long time, and I thought it was the board's idea that we were going to take money freed up in this 1 mil fund, and it was going to be used for other purposes, basically for things like level 1 and level 2 planning on buildings and facilities and things like that. And I don't know that the board really anticipated that would be money then used for startups on programs and so forth. And I would just, when I'm finished, maybe some other people on the board could make some comment about how they feel about that. But I just was surprised to find that was the bulk of the startup funds, $360,000 for the building, and probably some amount of the $100,000 for the equipment is to come from 1 mil money.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Dr. Kilty, I would agree and would appreciate other comments by the board as we reflected on board meetings and minutes and conversation about this during the budget development process. My interpretation and understanding of your intent was that the 1 mil should be looked at as more of one-time only strategic type of revenue sources with an emphasis on facilities, planning being a key part of that, But I believe, I thought it was your intent and interpreted your conversation intent was to free that up so that we could invest it in one-time only strategic type of initiatives, not ongoing base expenditures for things like personnel. So I took that interpretation, and in looking at the fund balance for the 1 mil, said this, I believe this was in at least the line of the intent of what you wanted to see 1 mil funds used for versus reoccurring personnel expenditures.
You may be absolutely correct there. It was not my recollection that we had talked about this. It was more level 1 and level 2 studies, largely on infrastructure, is how I interpreted it when we were having the conversation. But let me go on here and let me just talk about some things that are really sort of missing in the business plan. And the first one is there's really no discussion on competition in here other than what we had recently. And we know that there are 6 other welding programs at community colleges and 2 private schools in the state that provide welding. But the one thing that we didn't really talk about was migration, which we know satisfies an awful lot of demand. People already trained in the art move to your state when there are job opportunities. And so I went to the hourly mean wage on the table on page 5. And Wyoming looks a lot higher than the other oil-producing states. Why wouldn't somebody in Louisiana jump at the opportunity to increase their pay by $5 an hour coming to a state where there's no income tax? It just seemed to me that migration could probably satisfy an awful lot of this demand and is likely to. And, just philosophically thinking about this, we don't have to train all of the people for all jobs in Wyoming. We don't train any of our own doctors. We pay for some of that training and try to convince students to come back and stay here once they've been trained as doctors. But we depend upon migration when there are job opportunities, and people migrate. As you know, I think the median time for keeping any particular job in the United States now is about 5 years. People migrate a lot. So that was one thing that was not stressed in there. And then the other thing too is, I appreciate the letter from Cheyenne Leeds, but it's really the only support letter in there. And Ed and I had talked about memorandum of understanding or some sort of a letter of intent from people who'd actually employ our graduates. And Leeds won't be employing them, neither will the state of Wyoming, but these companies that we keep talking about are going to create the demand. It would be nice to see something concrete from them. And I'm serious about that.
Madam Chair, Dr. Kilty, do you want me to respond to both of those comments?
Do you want me to just go on and then you can respond to all 3?
So yes, and admittingly, the issue we're struggling with now is much of the need, as I say again, is anticipated. And the world of business recruitment, expansion, and relocation, unfortunately, is a confidential world, as frustrating as it can be. And there is only so much that people are willing to say or willing to do. And so, admittingly, and that's one of the reasons why I fully support the concept of a pilot with this project. Without a doubt. In migration, out migration, yes, we're going to see that. And any time we have the volatility in the workforce and the work associated with fields that employ welders, we may see some of that. We're seeing it right now with people leaving Gillette going to the Bakken. 2 things that I would suggest specifically about that, though. One, you're seeing a significant shift, and if you even read in the business plan here, the difference with the good jobs with high wages for welders now is they're people who are trained in high-skilled current technologies, and that's a significant turnover from the workforce as it exists now, and it's one of the primary justifications of this level program. So I would argue that until states start producing more of those types of individuals, the people who we may be thinking as existing out there may be somewhat limited. True, the young set is going to chase the dollar. I can't argue with that. If, though, that truly was happening at this point, I don't know that we would see the level of demand or the numbers even in the state of Wyoming as they exist right now. My guess is if there's truly migration or a transient population, it's more associated with western North Dakota at this time. Tell me again the question you just asked, Kevin.
Well, I think you covered it, but I was going to talk about one other thing here, and it goes back to a statement that you made earlier in the evening, that trying to meet the strategic needs of the state as stated in the state's strategic plan. You said that that was flexible enough that practically anything we do could be made to fit that. But yet, the state of Wyoming has an interest in not duplicating programs that already serve the need. And so I look at your table of what demand for welders is going to be in Wyoming, and it's not tremendous demand. It's in the neighborhood of 100 to 200 people over some period of time. Once again, it's sort of the same tables we've gone over and looked at over and over again. Yet we have welding programs in the state where almost all of the graduates leave the state of Wyoming when they're done with the program and go off to other venues. So it just seemed to me that the real interest in the state in this thing would be not to create yet a 7th program in welding at community colleges, but to at least satisfy that sort of demand by grabbing these graduates that leave the state of Wyoming and go on to build the economy in other states. It just seems to me that that's a win-win. We don't spend money, and we also develop the capability of keeping people in the state, people that have graduated from, and I'm talking specifically the program at Eastern that Mr. Vetter told me almost all those students leave. There aren't any of them that really stay in the Goshen and Platte, and, certainly not in their service area. Virtually everybody heads back to either Texas or North Dakota, and by God, we pay better here in Wyoming. It would be in the state's interest and everything to have a way to recruit those people and get them to stay in the state. They represent a sunk cost if they leave the state. So, just all things considered, this is a program in which I've looked over these business plans and I've thought about this a lot. I just don't know that I can support the proposal. I think this is exactly the kind of redundancy that maybe is not in the state's interest and maybe not in the interest of the county taxpayer either. So with that, I'll finish and let other people speak, but that's the way I see this program. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may respond to Dr. Kilty's, just a few comments there in regards to that. It is true, and we have heard that students from Eastern do leave. We've also heard that students graduating from the programs both at Casper and at the McMurray Training Center, Western, Gillette, do stay. And the numbers are clear. There are vacancies within the state of Wyoming. We need to fill those, but there are people that are staying. And I think we'll have to struggle through some of this. The duplication conversation is an interesting one, and I've struggled with it considerably, and I've had conversations with Dr. Rhodes and other folks at the commission, Commissioner Atwell, about that as well, because further definition is required for a couple of reasons. For example, nobody in the state at this point would argue that we need to have a nursing program at every community college and the university. And you could make the argument that those could be consolidated, we should do that, and then the argument of clinical, I mean, it just gets convoluted. There are times when duplication is truly necessary. In this case, if every program was producing maximum graduates every year from what we understand their cohort size, including the local proprietary ones, at best we would produce 150 graduates that could go into the market. If there truly is a 200 welder need as anticipated, annual openings, and if some of those 150 are leaving the state, I would argue that even with this program, we would not be saturating the market. Then take into account that we are dealing with populations who are oftentimes place-bound. We do not anticipate or hope that what we're recruiting is everybody from other areas in the nation and the state to come here for this program. We hope to recruit people in Laramie County or in Albany in our service area to come to these jobs, and we hope to get them to be placed in the industries that really are more fixed and not transient or associated specifically with the oil patch or things like that, but the manufacturing industries and those types of things. And so I would suggest that we believe this wouldn't saturate the market, that there is local demand, and people who may participate in this program aren't going to be able to relocate to the other colleges, and that we can actually successfully place these students in. And all that said, this is a pilot, and if I can't prove that to you within 2 years, we close the program, we deny the program.
Madam Chair. Yeah, I appreciate those remarks, but I would like to clarify that if you look at the darn table, It's not 200 students a year, it's 200 students over a long period of time. And that's part of the confusion here. We look at information that sometimes states new job openings per year. This one's talking about a net increase, and it's your table in your document, a net increase of 200 jobs over a decade. So that's, now I realize that I've seen other material that says, well, maybe it'll be more than 100 or 110 per year or something like that. But that just shows you that it's very difficult to get good information nailed down in this business plan to make a decision on. And I realize that it's a 2-year pilot program. It can be shut down at the end of the 2 years. But at the end of the 2 years, we will have if we shut it down, we will have a sunk cost of $560,000 in this thing. And that represents money that might be used for other things that would have more benefit to both the state and the county. And so I'm just kind of stuck there. I'm having trouble moving out of that mud hole.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, Dr. Kilty, I can appreciate that, and I do appreciate your comments and your thought that you've given to this. I would like to suggest, even though the numbers on job projections, depending on if it's the U.S. or they are, and they're so your best bet is you find the one areas that just have so many numbers, that if there's a large margin of error in their estimates, that you're still hitting the target. On page 4, though, what they do suggest is that it's 220 annual openings in the state of Wyoming, according to ONET. The other thing I'll just point out is yes, we will have some investment costs in this, without a doubt. And those costs, should we decide to close that, would be sunk. I do believe, though, that the $360,000 invested in the facility, and I would even think that the investment in the welding technology or the welding equipment, because of the opportunities to use that in the automotive programs and things like that, I think we can repurpose that and still find value out of it, but not every penny. I agree.
Madam Chair, may I just make one more
Trustee
clarification?
Kilty.
If you look at the table on page 4, the projected openings, there is a category in there, the code, for welders, cutters, and welder fitters. Those others that bring the total to 220 include pipe fitters, steam fitters, sheet metal workers, and industrial machinery mechanics. So they come from other categories.
That's fair, yeah.
The number for welders is really 90 a year.
Any other questions from the board?
Madam Chair.
Trustee Mosier?
You've already responded to one question I keep having, and that is, without a commitment of folks to hire these people, and I understand the privacy out there relative to firms who may come here, but even if they've said in the dark that they'll hire some of these people, I still remember, unfortunately, far too back in history when we were told, and we went to all kinds of throes to train over 200 people, of which I think 1 or 2 people were ultimately hired. We spent a lot of money on that, and I think there are some real challenges we have to be cautious about with this. And I hear Dr. Schaefer's comments about this is an anticipated need, and I do hear that. I understand that concern. Second issue that I kind of run into here, and I'm struggling with a little bit, given earlier discussion we have about programs and reviewing those programs. In this one, I believe the credits are somewhere between 67 to 72, and we're looking to reduce in other programs, so we're starting a new program here with the top end in terms of credit hours. That concerns me a bit, along with the fact that are those folks, when we use the term graduate of a program, and I don't know this with VETRS folks, I don't know this with the others, but are these folks really graduating? Is it just a certificate? Or do we have a lot of these folks who are going to take the basic primary welding activities that are necessary to get a job, and because, as you indicated, they'll chase the buck, they're gone? I'm just kind of wondering, when we're also concerned about completers, program completion, are these the folks who are going to stay to completion, or how do we define that completion? And I'll let you look at that, and then I got a couple other items I wanted to look at.
Madam Chair, Trustee Mosier, your comment again about the employers agreeing with that reminded me of what I was forgetting to answer. We did follow up and look into the MOUs that Gillette has. Those MOUs are actually scholarship MOUs. Some companies agree to pay a scholarship for students in the welding program, and that's the agreement that they have with that. But we would like to certainly nail down those numbers. On the curriculum side and the instruction side, actually this program at 72 credits meets the parameters of what I'm proposing in the policies that are working its way around campus right now for an applied program. So it is, I still, as I mentioned to Vice President Torvik when we discussed this and approved it in cabinet, I still have concern about the size of some of the semesters, asking for students to take 18 credit semesters. Some of that in here we believe may be a result of laboratory time or shop time that we will have to take a look at. But clearly I'm looking for programs that could be feasibly completed for a full-time college-ready student within 2 academic years, even allowing for the use of a summer in that year. And 72 is really that threshold. And again, it just further suggests I need to bring some of that information to you because you're interested in it, and certainly you should be part of that conversation. The completer issue and the gen ed issue is another one that we've been looking at. I had a conversation with the Academic Standards Committee last week when we were discussing this, and it is a fair point. In almost all of our technical programs, and not even argue in some of our transfer programs, we delayed general education and required related general education to the second year. Part of that is the current design of the certificates that they're all applied to the disciplinary. But even given that, we're losing. They finish the certificate. They finish even all of the coursework associated with it. They do not finish their constitutional requirement, their communication, their mathematics, and they leave. And we're talking with the faculty right now about ways to do that, adding the gen eds in as co-requisites for first-year coursework and doing a lot of things. So across the board, we are losing students. And some of it is they're getting what they need, not what we believe that they need to complete, and they're leaving us. And we're looking at that, and I could show you lots of programs right now that do that.
Okay. I appreciate the challenge with that. I would come back, and since you indicated in the future we'll look more at this, I assumed from your response that applied science 72 top, but the Associate of Arts or the Associate of Science, you're looking at a lower number.
Yeah. Madam Chair, Trustee Mosier, I believe what I've recommended is a maximum of 64 credits for AA and AS degrees that also have a recognizable, purposeful design of a general education core associated with that.
Okay. Let me move on to a couple of other items, and I think this one may be one that concerns me significantly is the cost to students. When I look at the information in here, and it talks about student cost, and I had that, program cost pricing to students on page 8 leads that page. We don't have anything firm here, and yet when I go into the data that you have, and I look, for example, at gross incremental tuition revenue, if I look at the number of students there, and I would assume it has some relationship to the number of students, you're looking at somewhere around $3,000, I think. No, maybe less than that. But you're looking at if we divide 15 students into the item A, gross incremental tuition revenue, that number that is being used, and maybe it was 2,000, I forget what the amount is, but it's consistent, simply multiplied by the number of students in the following years. And my question is not so much that it's used in that fashion, but when I try and figure out what it's the cost, what are we pricing this to students at, I can't come up to what a student is going to pay to get a degree or a certificate in this area.
Madam Chair, Trustee Mosier, we will actually have to publish that, I believe, when we get to, at least for the certificate component with the new federal regulations with that. I'll run the math when you're asking the next question here to try to get at what would they be expected to pay. But just to reconcile, I think where you're sort of struggling with it, the numbers we project on the budget are FTE. So it's 15 full-time equivalents, assuming we're going to get students and they're going to be moved through it in a cohort block area. The tuition that's within the budget then is what we currently receive for an average annualized tuition revenue per FTE. So there's some averaging and things like that in there. Whereas if you're referencing the cost to students, you're looking at the current tuition and fee cost plus the additional program fee that we associate and suggest will be $200 a student here. So the students would pay standard tuition, standard fees plus an additional program fee of $200 to cover the consumable costs associated with the program. So if you add all that up for the 4 years that it would take, we can get you a total of what that cost is. I just don't have the calculation.
And the reason I'm looking at is I'm wondering how that compares to the programs in whether it be Torrington or other parts, other colleges in the state. Are we competitive with that cost? Are we high, low? How do we rate in terms of the private competition? Might be interesting to have a handle on that.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, Trustee Mosier, what I can tell you with some relative certainty, we're pretty much on par with Gillette because that's what we've mirrored it off of, assuming that except for our fluctuation in mandatory fees, I would be willing to bet that the student fees associated with this program in Torrington or Casper or Western would be fairly similar. So really the differentiator is actually the institutional fees associated with the college, probably not those associated with this program.
Okay, and then on equipment, and we probably beat on this like a dead horse. I just struggle with $100,000. I know you're working with Lincoln, but when I remember back at looking at the initial information on that, it just doesn't strike me that the $100,000 will outfit the number of stations that you're talking about. I just struggle with that being the magic number. Do we have any better data on that now as to what it'll cost for each of those stations?
This was an estimate provided by Lincoln in terms of 12 stations and the attendant equipment that would accompany it.
That's with all the leads and everything
It
they would
is.
need?
It is absolutely also with self-ventilating for each of those units.
Okay. I guess the last thing and what bothers me the most and why I may, at least at this point, I'm finding it difficult to support the program is you're looking at a program which we've discussed relative to the needs of the state, as Kevin pointed out. I'm wondering, why not expand other programs, whether it be in Torrington or other places? And I know you're talking site-bound may be an issue, and those folks want it here, but we all understand the economies of scale, that it might be a whole lot less expensive to expand the Torrington program. And I realize that's not our local issue, but I wonder at it from the state perspective. It seems to me like it would make more sense to do that or with some other proven programs that are already in place to use the state's money wisely in that respect.
Madam Chair, Trustee Mosier, and I can respect that. But I would also caution that line of thinking for a couple of reasons. One is a relatively practical reason, and that is that currently there's these interesting rules in the commission that require these reciprocal agreements and approval for one campus to come into another campus's service area, and it actually has to have a formal agreement and has to go through the commission to say we want you to come in and serve Laramie County, Eastern, or whoever. So that's the practical aspect. But the other aspect, and the one that would concern me more, and again, we are working on good faith with our partners in the community that the need will be there, the jobs will be there, and I recognize that and I admit that. But consider this, if those people are coming to us, if our economic development group is coming to us, and what we tell them is why don't you talk to Eastern and have them expand their program, or perhaps you should talk to Casper. That does not build goodwill, and we have absolutely no control over getting Eastern or Casper to actually grow that program. And after all is said and done, if we're having to exert time, energy, and resources to convince another college to expand their program to serve our region, and then if we don't, it's a problematic conversation, and that's really what we're trying to do here, is be a good partner locally, do it with all prudence, being conservative and thinking, if the need does not exhibit itself. And I will assure you, and I will continue to assure you, and I will show you products, we will be looking at programs through a much more rigorous and objective lens than we ever have, and we've started that groundwork right now. And so regardless of this one or any other program, if we aren't meeting needs and being effective, we're going to find ways to improve those or reinvest our resources. You have my commitment to that, but it is a slippery slope, and something that's very concerning to me. If that's the recourse that I have to give to our local partners, is to talk to the commission or another college to expand your programs, it just does not build goodwill. So my words of caution, but I understand your perspective, Ed.
Madam Chair?
Trustee Erickson?
I'm really listening intently to the concerns and the rigor and the depth of the comments by Ed and Kevin. But I'm reminded of the early conversation in October. First time I came to one of these meetings, and I wasn't on the board at the time, but just listening. And the staff came to the board and indicated that they had information coming from the community, from the economic, as I listen here, the economic group that says, hey, we've got a growing need, and it's an anticipated growing need. Dino Noble, Holly Frontier has indicated that there's a growing need that they have. Cheyenne Lee's, I understand that they don't represent a particular company, but they certainly know something about how to recruit in this community, because they've got a great track record. Then I think the workforce department at the state of Wyoming sent a letter in saying that, yes, it would be something that would be useful here at Laramie County Community College. And so you, as a board, you gave the green light to move forward. And we've had a series of conversations all the way along about the anticipated need. It's not that well documented. And there's been concern by the Wyoming Community College Commission that, okay, is there competition? Is there duplication? But it looks like the Community College Commission is willing to approve the pilot. The pilot makes some sense. What Dr. Joe indicated is that we should be responsive. And sometimes we have to go on the anticipated, or I should say, yeah, the anticipated need. The business plan isn't maybe all as good as it could be if they had maybe 3 months to put it together. I think it's a pretty darn good response in a very quick period of time to give some information to help us understand what we're getting into. There's no doubt that there's going to be an expenditure here that if it doesn't go through, well, it didn't work well, and we might kick ourselves in the rear end. I do have a concern also about the operating and maintenance costs down the road. If we're going to take money to go with the welding program, something else is going to probably have to give a little bit. But I think it's been a continuous message from this board, from what I've been observing, to move forward with this. And I know I'm going to vote for it, and I would hope that, Ed, you're struggling over there, so there's a possibility. We're gone with him, we're not going to get Kevin. I'm sure of that. So that's just the way it goes. Or we're going to have
The
different
great
views.
Karnak is reading my mind.
Whatever.
That's reverse
But-
psychology. I like that approach.
So I would hope that we move forward with a vote soon so that we can get on with the rest of the agenda. I'm interested in other comments, but I do want to thank Kevin and Ed for the depth of their analysis of this particular proposal. I just think that we need to go ahead, be confident in our staff. They are doing what they think is the right thing, and so I'm going to go forward with it.
Thank you, Don.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Bill.
may I have the floor?
You may.
As they say in the legislature, I'll be brief. I would just like to say that there isn't a day that goes by that you don't read about some other factory or some other place in the country closing up. And these people are going to have to go somewhere and they're going to have to move. Kevin, you're right. There isn't, we do train people. It's been a problem in Wyoming for a long time. But if you read any statistics about who's coming here and how these things are going to grow in all these different places, Carol and I both, Chairman Merrill and I serve on the hospital foundation board, and over again they tell us that things are growing. And this is going to be a field that is going to be needed. In the national meeting that I just attended, they talked about the shortage of skilled labor, the shortage of skilled courses to train people. And so I just would like to say I will be voting in favor because I think it's worth a try.
Thank you. Are there any more comments by the board?
Just to do a little horse trading here.
Oh, good.
Compromise is always good, right?
You bet.
One of the first things that I think was good news in terms of this program was the probationary approach to it. That's what probably will allow me to vote for it, because I know that we're going to have an eye on this, even though we've sunk this cost. It's there, but I do think there's some possibilities for it. And I guess what I want to horse trade a little bit on is I would hope that we have an advisory committee, as we used to say in another environment I was in, most ricky-ticky. So I would hope that would happen, that we have an advisory committee, and that advisory committee helps us set up the program in terms of the equipment and the supplies, and that kind of avoid any unwanted surprises as much as possible.
Thank you, Ed. Very valuable.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Trustee Mosier, as it outlines in the business plan, we will have an advisory committee. In fact, I'll say all of our programs will, if they do not already, have active advisory committees. And one of the primary roles of that is at least reviewing and looking at the curriculum and the offerings of the program. So that's not even a horse trade to me. I mean, I can guarantee you that we will have an active advisory committee or board with this program.
Thank you. Any
Question.
Oh, go ahead.
No, question. Calling for the question.
We need a motion.
Well, no, I need to ask if the faculty or staff has any comments, if they have any comments, or if the public. Okay, and then I will read the President's recommendation first, that the Laramie County Community College Board of Trustees approve a pilot program to offer certificate and Associate of Applied Science degree in welding. As a pilot, this program will require full board approval within 2 years from the approval date. Without this approval, the program shall be considered terminated. And now, Ed?
So move.
Second.
Any other comments? All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
disapproval? Oh, Brenda's still with us. Anyone against?
Nay.
Now I have to hang up.
Thanks, Brenda. Okay, everyone but Kevin voted in approval. Congratulations.
Just means the work starts, so.
Great.
Thank you, Madam
Sorry
Chair.
about
Thank
that.
you, members of
Yeah.
the board.
But a spirited discussion.
Good
Thank
discussion.
you. I've lost my next movement here. Okay, we have additional items. First of all, Don has a question for President Schaefer.
Yes, the College of Health Sciences, you're currently in a recruitment selection process. Could we have a status report as to how that's coming along?
Yeah, Stan, if you want to do that.
Yes, Trustee Erickson. Yes, we are in the process. The committee is meeting and are narrowing the field. On Friday of this week, we're going to be conducting interviews via Skype to further narrow that field. So we're making rather rapid progress now.
And how many people are in that field?
We began with 26, and we are currently at 4.
Thank you.
And when do you,
Go
Madam
ahead.
Chair, when do you anticipate that there will be a decision?
Well, the committee will not be making the decision. We will be narrowing the field and recommending to President Schaefer the number that should come to campus for further interviews in person.
Okay, again, how long do you anticipate that, Dr. Joe?
Madam Chair, Trustee Erickson, a couple of things with this. One thing is just a point of protocol. We've been taking the approach with these executive and administrative positions of keeping them open until filled, and so we are always actively seeking applicants until they're filled, and we've had some luck with that. I don't know if that's making a difference in this one. After we conduct televideo or telephone semifinalist interviews, and the committee determines what types of finalists they'd like to bring to campus. Assuming that determination may take a week or two, and then we have to schedule the time for them to come to campus. So, rough guessing it here, month and a half to get it all wrapped up with offer and stuff. But that may be accelerated or lengthened depending on how the semifinalists shake out.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I want to comment that this is a really good process because the college community feels really engaged, and all of us are invited out to meet the candidates as we did with Joe. And so it seems much more open and amenable to everyone being happy, or most everyone being happy with the choices that are made here. So I think we've come a long way in the last couple of years.
Madam Chair, members of the board, if I may, too, the one wild card that we entered into this situation, of course, is our new Vice President for Academic Affairs. This is a key member and hire for his team, and I imagine he will have considerable input and conversation of the process. That may elongate the process or may not, but we're glad to have him on board, and I think he takes this as a serious hire for one of his first deans, and I know he'll be involved in it.
No pressure. Thanks, Jose. I have a question about signage on the campus. I went to the foundation meeting today and actually know where it is, but I was kind of thinking that nobody else would be able to find it because there is no signage there yet. How are we coming on signage? That's the question.
Lisa, I don't know if you want to address that. I thought we actually had signage for it.
There's a booth out there.
Madam Chair and members of the board, we had talked about this when the foundation first moved
Right.
down, and we discussed this with Tim McNamara as part of the wayfinding. And so hopefully we could ask Tim or Carol for an update on our wayfinding process.
That would be great.
And maybe they could give us an update on that at our next meeting. I'm not sure where they are in that process, but hopefully they will include us in their wayfinding.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the board, I think you reported either at your retreat or the last study session, I think it was at your retreat, that they're developing or issuing the RFP now for the wayfinding process. They took another run at it after your comments on whether or not the marquees should be part of that conversation as well, and if that ties into digital signage. But my understanding, they're either in development or getting ready to issue an RFP to do that, and looking at a summertime project, because I believe you've already approved, and the money for the wayfinding project was in our maintenance for our projects that went through the budget for last year. So, but yeah, we can certainly follow up with that. We've heard numerous comments about signage, either upgrading, improving, or adding signage on campus, and so we'll ask Carol to bring a update.
And I'm really excited about that because we came out to a program on Everest that was amazing. But first of all, the room was too small, and I know I've talked about this already, so a lot of people couldn't get in the room, but they might have, and some of them did arrive on campus on time, but could not find their way to the room. So it'll be great for us to do it, because then they'll be able to, and then once they got there to close to the room, they couldn't find their way back to the parking lot where they parked. They said this campus has really grown, so that's a good thing. But our signage will really help. Thank you. Additional items, information only. Do we have any reports on any of these items?
No, ma'am. Sorry, for your
Okay.
information.
Well, thank you so much.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
would just like to ask if, and maybe they're already out there, if we could go back and look at the motions, if you could include back to 2011.
She does a great job of that.
Okay.
Thanks, Dad. If there is no other business to come before the board, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you. Yay. No executive session. Call you up.